Raymond Chandler, the little sister. That's a detective story, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a story. Amy Vanderbilt's Complete Book of Etiquette.
That's a reference book. Put it over there.
I guess you... Okay.
This is Thomas Mann's Death in Venice.
All right, it's a novel. My Life on the Plains, General Custer.
That's biography.
If it's not complete fiction, I'll give it to you, Mortimer.
Very good. And here's a Latin dictionary, which I would take as a reference book.
Yeah, it's a reference book.
Truman Capote. Now, is that fiction or fact?
That's fact.
As much as Custer.
Yes, I guess it is. The works of Thomas Paine, political philosophy.
Philosophy, indeed.
Abraham Lincoln, collected works of Abraham Lincoln. That's political philosophy. What's that?
Poems and songs of Oliver Burns.
Oh, yeah, that goes over here. Now, Gargantua and Pantagruel.
Oh,
that's a novel. That's a novel.
And here's the Los Angeles Blue Book, which is a social register book.
That's a reference book.
Reference book.
Yeah.
The Arms of Croup, that's kind of social science, very popular social science, isn't it? Current events.
Current events. What we're doing, of course, here is to divide, first of all the fictional works there on this side, all the imaginative books on this side, and the expository
ones on this side.
Right.
Ernest Hemingway, The Torrents of Spring is a novel.
Right.
Belongs to The Way of All Flesh is a novel.
Right.
1984.
That's a novel. Yeah.
The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. That
that's
goes
not a novel.
No, that's not a novel. That's social psychology.
The Jungle, Upton Sinclair. That's a novel.
That almost is not a novel.
I know it is. You're right.
What would you do with a book which is a textbook in basic conversational French?
I think that's a reference book.
Reference book.
Well, maybe no. Listen, that's a practical book.
It's a how-to book. That's a practical book. Very good indeed. 1601. That's
fantasy. That's a novel of Mark Twain.
The Origin of Species, Natural Science.
Natural Science. That's Newton. That's Natural Science.
Natural Science.
There's
that's the great work, Principia Mathematica.
Right.
Philosophia Naturalis, the mathematical principles of natural philosophy.
Here's a volume of Encyclopædia Britannica that goes with a reference.
That's a reference
over
book.
Here.
Indeed. And here's another book that goes with the reference books. It's a Britannica World Atlas.
Right. That's a reference book.
What would you do with the Essays of Francis? That's philosophical. Would you say the Essays of Francis Bacon?
It's not science. No, that's philosophical, certainly. Here must be another scientific. That's Euclid. That's
that's mathematics.
Okay, but that goes with natural science?
No, I want to make a separate pile of mathematics books.
What do your piles represent here, Mortimer?
Well, they represent 4 or 5 different kinds of expository books. First place, the basic distinction here is between the practical books, the how-to books, the books that tell you how to act, or how to do something, how to make something, and the theoretical books. The theoretical books I divided into history and social science and natural science and philosophy and mathematics.
Right, okay, fine. El Greco, where does El Greco go? 50 reproductions?
Well, it depends. That's difficult. That's not a...
But that's imaginative in somehow...
I would call that a coffee table book or a non-book.
I'm going to put it among poetry.
Who's Who in America is a reference.
Yeah.
There she goes.
By the way, I've got 3 piles over on this side, on the imaginative literature side. This is fiction, that is stories and novels, and this is poems, and this is plays.
And here's The Rise of American Civilization, which is history.
Sure, history. Ernest Hemingway, short stories of, that's fiction.
And Mara Lindbergh's Gift from the Sea. Now, what would you do with that?
Well, I don't know, Mortimer. I guess it's philosophy, isn't it?
Well,
it's kind of popular philosophy.
Popular philosophy.
All right. What do we got here? Modern British poetry. That's clearly poems.
Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah, it's a novel.
Robbins.
Now, listen, The Imitation of Christ.
That's a theological book.
Where does that belong? With the philosophy?
With the philosophy.
All right. Why does it belong with the philosophy?
Well, philosophy and theology are both non-empirical sciences. I mean, they don't proceed by experiment or investigation.
Right.
They're quite different. Theology and philosophy are different, but they are distinguished from the social and the natural sciences.
Right, okay. The Lives of William Benton, that's a biography. Right.
Robinson Crusoe is fiction.
Well, yeah, I guess it is.
Sure.
Yeah, sure it is. Here's How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler and Charles Van Doren.
That's a how-to book.
What do you got there?
Plato.
Plato.
That's philosophy, clearly.
Well, maybe it's poetry.
No, Charles, this is philosophy.
Okay.
Written in dialogue form, but it's philosophy.
All right. A Journey to the Western Islands of Scotland, Dr. Johnson. That's autobiography, really.
In this pile here.
Okay.
An actor prepares by the great Russian actor himself, Stanislavski, is a how-to book, isn't it?
I think so. It belongs with How to Read a Book.
Indeed.
Peck's Bad Boy and His Pa, a compendium of fun, profusely illustrated. I think that's stories.
A book of American spirituals
is
poetry.
Poetry and song.
Venus Adonis is poetry.
Of Shakespeare.
The Peter Principle? That's low-down social science, wouldn't you say?
Yes.
Very low down.
Listen, I got a big one for you, Mortimer. What? What's this?
Abel Johnson Tasman's Journal. I have to open it and find out. I can't do that without looking at it. Oh, this is a book of discovery. Magnificent book, by the way.
Yeah.
But it's a book of travel and discovery, exploration.
Travel and discovery, so it's like General Custer.
Like General Custer, yes.
Now, a Michelin guide, that's a reference.
Reference book.
What's that?
1974.
Listen, that's somebody's yearbook in high school.
That's not a reference book. That's a non-book.
Where do we put
it on
that?
the floor.
Put it back here. I'll put it back
What do you do? Nicholas and Alexandria is history, current history. No.
Well, then that goes on that side.
That's right.
Mickey Mouse, movie stories. That goes over among the stories. Crime and Punishment among the stories.
The poems of Browning.
Poetry.
Go ahead. Los Angeles Telephone reference book.
Right.
The French Revolution by Thomas Carlyle is history.
Right. What's this? Oil painting, step by step.
That's how-to.
How-to.
The Mysterious Universe by Sir James Jeans is natural science.
Okay. The Holy Bible.
That's a special book. I'm going to put that here. That's sui generis. It's a book that stands by itself.
Ernest Hemingway, A Life Story.
That's an autobiography. Or
biography, yeah. The Last Days of Pompeii. The history?
That's history. No, by Bulwer Lytton. Oh, no, that's fiction.
That's a novel, yes.
But it could have been history.
It could have been.
What now? I've got one for you. What do you do with Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland?
It could be anything. It could be mathematics,
philosophy.
It could be fantasy, it could be a fable, but I think it's a novel, according to this cut that we're doing here.
In this book, Living Off the Country, How to Stay Alive in the Woods?
How to Stay Alive, so that's a how-to book.
Yes.
Right.
This one, which is the Koran. Oh, that I know. That goes with the Bible.
Interpretations of Life, a survey of contemporary lives by Will and Ariel Durant.
Kind of minor philosophy.
All right. Astrology, that's junk. No, wait a minute.
No.
That's Louis MacNeice.
That's a history of astrology.
Yeah,
that
goes in history. Papillon by Henri Charrière. Now
that's fiction, I think.
Well, it's supposed to be an autobiography.
Let's put it in
You want to put it in fiction or
no, let's put it with history and biography.
Okay. Here's The Emperor Jones, by the way. That's a play, perfectly
The Living Sea is work in biological science.
Yeah, I think it is, yeah. The Diary of Samuel Pepys, that's autobiography.
Autobiography, indeed.
Collected Poems of Robert Frost, no question. That's
and we are left with two books that are special.
Yeah.
And the reason why they're special, Charles, is they're sacred books. Mm-hmm. And so they must be read differently from all other books, whether you read them as a believer or not.
Right, okay, so that we'll leave them there in a separate pile.
Now what we have here then is all the imaginative books here divided into three piles. What are your three piles again?
Well, this is fiction here, or stories and novels, and this is poetry, and this is plays.
And then past this line, we have all the expository books which expound knowledge or opinion, or are instructional in the sense that tell you how to do things. The instructional books of that character, the practical books, are the books, the how-to books, the books that direct action or tell you how to produce things. And then we have biography and history, the social sciences, the natural sciences, mathematics, and philosophy, both speculative and practical. Now, that kind of vision we put into the publication of the great books when we put these color patches on the back of them, because all the books with the gold, the yellowish gold, are books of imaginative literature, poetry and drama and novels and so forth. The books that are with the red on the back are philosophy and theology. The books with the blue on the back are history and the social sciences. And the books with the green tabs are the natural sciences and mathematics and biology.
And then you've got the reference books there.
Right there.
Yeah. Mortimer, in doing this, we've been classifying books here. We're not doing it just for the fun of it. There's a real purpose in doing this, isn't there?
The reason is that, in my judgment, that reading a book involves asking three or four fundamental questions. What is the book as a whole about? How does it say what it says in detail? Is it true? And what of it?
Right.
Now, those are the most general questions you can ask about any book.
And you ask them about every book.
Every book.
Yeah.
Except perhaps the reference books.
Yeah.
You don't ask that kind of question about the social register or the telephone book. But all these books...
You might ask, is it true?
Yeah, you can assume that. And I don't think you ask it about the non-books, the coffee table books.
Right.
But any serious book, any book worth reading actively for the sake of increasing your understanding or increasing your knowledge requires you to ask these questions. But you can't ask them in the same way of all kinds of books because, for example, let's take the poetry for a moment. Poetic truth is utterly different from scientific truth.
Right.
And if you said, is it true, without knowing the different kind of book you were asking it of, you would be mistaken. Similarly, mathematical
For example, take that book, Papillon,
Yeah.
from which the movie has been made. If you put that on this side of the line, if you put it in the expository books, then you have to ask different kinds of questions about its
Precisely.
truth than if I had been willing to put it in fiction.
And that's why what you did about Custer was significant, too.
That's
if you put
right.
it in fiction, you wouldn't be concerned
If
with
you
it.
put it in fiction, you don't worry about whether it's true, in a sense. But there is a sense in which a
Precisely.
fictional book is true or not true. If it is true to life, true to general experience as we all know it. How do you read a philosophy book, a book of philosophy? What's the, how do you approach it? What's the, could you say in just in a sentence or so how you read it?
I think, in the case of philosophy, and I'm not sure there's any difference here between philosophy and science, the most important thing to discover in reading the book is the problem the author is trying to solve.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes the author tells you what that is, and sometimes he doesn't. But unless you know what his focal problem is, what his objective is as an analyzer, as a solver of problems, you can't read the book carefully and well.
As far as history is concerned, I would say, particularly current history, I would say that the stance that you bring to it is one of doubt. You read current history with a grain of salt. You ask yourself, what kind of position is this author writing from? Who's he trying to convince? Who is he trying to con, almost, you know? Because an awful lot of current history is written with an aim in mind. And as far as science goes, what would you say?
Well, there, really you proceed with it quite different. After you know what the problem is, you have to see how the evidence has been gathered, how the experiments that have been performed, the phenomena that have been observed, help you to solve the problem. You've got to see how the scientist operates inductively from the evidence to a generalization or an elaborate theory that solves the problem.
Does that mean you have to repeat the experiment?
No. If it's described, not as an individual, no.
You don't have to go into the laboratory.
No.
You can still read Newton without going through the...
Well,
what about mathematics?
Newton describes his experiments for you. In the optics, for example, Newton gives you diagrams and shows you what little experiments performed. Now, mathematics is different again, because there, the thing that you're looking for are demonstrations. You've got to look for the logical rigor of a demonstration.
And so you want to see whether the book is self-consistent, whether it contradicts itself in some way. In the case of a novel, the situation is very different. All imaginative literature, you read with passion, Mortimer. You read with total involvement of your personality, all the way from your head, down to your heart, down to your toes. Everything is involved.
Well, that's exactly the opposite with respect to the books that are expository. There, you read them entirely from the neck up.